So Candace Owens has officially gone mask off. Mask off. You know, I knew that Candace Owens would eventually go down this path because we've seen it all before. Candace Owens thought she could dish out the same treatment toward Jewish folk that she'd been dishing out to black people for years. And she got her wake-up call, and she got booted from the Daily Wire. Now Candace Owens is making Nazi apologetic videos on Twitter, YouTube, whatever other platform she's on. And honest to God, it actually is starting to become disturbing how far down the depths of depravity and into just the depths of darkness that alternative right-wing media is starting to go.
As for me, when I started looking into it, was coming across a huge fact that we ethnically, the Allies, ethnically cleansed 12 million Germans. Because when you say to people, okay, what is it about Hitler? Why is he the most evil? Well, the first thing people would say is, well, an ethnic cleansing almost took place. And now I offer back, you mean like we actually did to the Germans? Here's a clip again from that documentary I keep telling you that you have to watch. It premiered on BBC, and it is entitled The Savage Peace. I'm going to give you a clip here of a Czechoslovakian civilian who watched what was done to his German-speaking neighbors immediately following the end of the war. Take a listen.
Okay, here's a problem I have with Candace's wording. She talks about, oh, people say Hitler's evil, and I'm like, well, why? Because of ethnic cleansing? Well, we actually did that to the Germans. So it's like, okay, so for some reason, when someone calls Adolf Hitler evil, you automatically, your spine goes erect, and you feel the need to say, well, actually. Are you inferring that Adolf Hitler did not actually ethnically cleanse people? Are you insinuating that when you say that we actually ethnically cleansed 12 million Germans? Because the reality is, yes, 12 million Germans were expelled from Eastern European nations. This did happen. However, it's almost like you're trying to argue that the Allies rounded up 12 million Germans and exterminated them. When we talk about ethnic cleansing in relation to the Nazis and Hitler, we're not just talking about people being forced from their lands. We're talking about forced extermination. People being rounded up into concentration camps and killed en masse. Not small situations here and there. No, an actual systematic, not systemic, that word's made up, an actual systematic effort to exterminate millions of people. We know the Nazis did this. It's not a matter of debate. So when Candace Owens says, we actually did to the Germans, it begs the question, what are you trying to say about what Hitler did? Are you trying to infer that Hitler didn't actually exterminate 6 million Jews among millions of other ethnic undesirables in the eyes of the German government at that time? In the eyes of the Nazis at that time? Are you insinuating that somehow or another the extermination we were taught about extensively was the bullshit one, but this is the real one that people don't know about? Okay.
Altogether, 2,000 Sudeten Germans were murdered in just 5 days in June.
Also ich habe schon als Genozid angesehen.
Well, I certainly saw it as genocide.
Inneren Schweinehund.
They just let out their inner bastard on these defenseless people. That was clear.
It took decades to get this small memorial to the killings erected in the teeth of local Czech opposition.
I can say that what happened here in 45 is no different at all to the Third Reich. The morals of these people who did this, they were the same.
They were the same.
A second. So, because Germans were killed, innocent Germans were murdered by Czechoslovakian people in, like, I guess, 2,000 of them were killed? That means the Allies were the exact same as the Nazis. You know what I really find funny is Candace Owens doesn't seem to feel the need to try to defend the Japanese. And when I say the Japanese, I don't mean Japanese civilians in the US who were rounded up and put in camps. No, I mean the actual Japanese government, like the Japanese at that time, who were raping and murdering and pillaging and destroying everything in sight. Millions of people killed. It's always funny when the far right, the only mass murdering, genociding nation, they seem to feel this need to defend and come up with niche-like scenarios that took place and say, well, we were just like them. Why don't you feel the same need to try to cleanse the image of the Japanese, Imperial Japan? Why? Could it possibly be because they're not white? Could it possibly be because they don't have blonde hair and blue eyes and white skin? I'm curious. Is it because the Japanese don't belong? And I don't know why Candace Owens is trying to gain favor with these kinds of people. Ma'am, you're black. Anyways, you don't seem to feel the need to try to draw up comparisons between the Allies and the Japanese. Why is that? You brought up innocent Germans being killed by Czechoslovakians. That's not evidence of the Allies being the same as Nazi Germany in any capacity. We didn't willfully start a world war. We didn't exterminate millions of people at that time in concentration camps. It just didn't happen that way. It just didn't. I'm sorry. Did we do some fucked up things back then? Yes, it was a world war. But are both sides the same? No. Both sides were not the same. And this isn't an indictment against the German people or the German race or whatever the case might be, or the Aryan race or whatever. Sometimes people fall on the wrong side of history. It happens. The United States was on the wrong side of history many times. We had Jim Crow. We had slavery. We exterminated the natives. That's how we had this vast nation of ours. We pushed the natives further and further and further and further. And of course, we bought a lot of land. But there were native people living on that land. And we kept killing them and killing them and killing them. We have blood on our hands as well. But when we talk about World War II, it is undeniable the level of malevolence emanating from the Nazis and Imperial Japan. And to try to grab pocket instances of innocent German people being murdered and thrown into mass graves as evidence that the Allies and the Nazis were the same is hilarious. And the only kind of people who fall for this are people who want to believe it anyways. I'll wait to see if Candace Owens has the same sympathy and concern for the image of Imperial Japan, or if, the blonde-eyed, blue-eyed German people are the only, people she's concerned about defending in this World War II video here.
Imagine camps being used to kill people. Oh, you mean the exact same camps that we then transferred the Germans into so that we could, mass kill them? Yeah, I bet you've never heard the name Solomon Morel before, and you should know about him because Solomon Morel's an interesting character. He had some Soviet training, and then one day he just stood up on top of a table and said to these innocent German-speaking civilians, I'm going to torture you because I don't know where my parents are, and they were put into camps. And then he began to torture these individuals who were completely guilty of nothing. They were innocent. Here's another clip from that documentary. Take a listen.
The pyramid method was when 4 were thrown next to each other, and 4 then diagonally on top of them, and then another 4, until they were quite high. And then not always, but every so often the militia climbed on top, and they danced on the prisoners. No one came away from this unharmed, and people died.
I wanted to force my mother to commit suicide. Men took their lives by hanging, and women by walking into the electric fence.
All under the direction of Solomon Morel. He was a particularly sadistic individual. Now you might be thinking, sure, something must have happened to him. He must have faced some consequences, and you'd be right. He did. In 1996, and this is according to his Wikipedia page, Solomon Morel was formally indicted of genocide by the Polish Public Prosecutor's Office. The indictment was later amended to include war crimes, crimes against humanity, and communist crimes because he was a commie. The latter charge was added.
I need Candace to realize you just defeated your entire argument even saying this. I want to ask Candace something. Since you're so smart, do you believe that if the Axis won the war, that any genocidal actor would have faced any charges ever? The Poles actually tried to get this guy locked up at a later point in time. Do you actually believe that if the Nazis in Imperial Japan had succeeded, anyone would have faced charges for genocide decades later? Answer that question truthfully. Furthermore, about this Solomon Morel character, it's always funny that Candace Owens says, we. Candace Owens, the Soviets turned that camp over to the Poles. This is not the Allies as a whole making a big decision that we're going to just pack all these Germans into this camp. Need I remind you, Candace, the Soviets were allies with the Germans in the beginning. It's because Adolf Hitler was a duplicitous, low-down traitor. He turned on his own boys, he turned on his own homeboys and invaded Soviet Russia that they began to fight. But let's not be mistaken here. This was a Soviet camp turned over to the Poles. This is not some big, allies-wide decision to make this choice. There were war crimes committed by Americans. Is that reflective of the American people or the American government at that time? No. The governments as a whole at this particular point in time by no means supported mass genocide camps for Germans. Otherwise, it would have happened. What could the Germans have done about it? Seriously, if the Allies actually wanted to do this en masse, what could the Germans have done to stop it? Nothing. It didn't happen. Was there mass expulsion of German people from Eastern Europe? Yes. Were there mass camps in which they were being slaughtered in the millions like the Jews and other, undesirable European groups by the Nazis? No. No, the Allies' decisions in the war was not perfect. Even post-war weren't perfect. But no, 12 million Germans were not treated in any way, shape, or form close to the way the Nazis treated their ethnic prisoners. They had an intent to destroy and not even just expel, cleanse from this earth. Cleanse. You purposefully misrepresent this to make it seem like Solomon Morel's decisions were reflective of the goals of all the Allies. Not even talking about the fact that the Soviets were one of the most ruthless of the Allies. Like I just said, the Soviets and the Germans were buddies before. They were friends. These two factions were not like... The Soviets weren't like, oh my God, the Germans are so evil. No, the Germans and the Soviets conspired together to crush Poland, to crush them. Bringing up an instance of some insane guy who worked for the Soviets and worked in a camp that was owned by the Soviets and turned over to the Polish who then tried to hold this guy legally accountable decades later. We know the Nazis would have never held anyone legally accountable for any exterminative acts. How we know that is because that was their MO. If the Allies actually wanted to move like that, we would have moved like that. We would have actually done that type of shit. And there would have been no, hey man, you need to face these charges for what you did. We didn't forget. Time to come home. That would have never happened if we actually felt that way. She uses the word we to communicate this idea that the Allies were the same. But if we were, we would have done the same. We didn't do the same. We just didn't. It didn't happen that way. And the only people, like I said before, the only people who are going to believe what Candace is saying is people who want to believe this. People who want to believe the Nazis weren't the bad guys. And like I said before, isn't it funny that these people don't extend the same empathy and apologetic arguments for the Japanese? I'm waiting for Candace to explain why the Japanese weren't that bad. But because the Japanese aren't white, we're not going to get a crash course episode on why the Japanese might have been the good guys all along. We're not. They're not white, they're not Christian, they're not blonde hair, they're not blue-eyed. So we're not going to be hearing anything about how the Japanese weren't that bad. You can bring up like small instances and events, but you and I both know, Candace Owens, that these events are not reflective of the Allies at that time. You know it. We all know it. It's just the truth. It's just the honest truth. If we were that evil, we could have gone above and beyond, but we weren't.
In 2004 and constitutes a specific crime under Polish criminal law. So in 1998, Poland requested that he be extradited for the trial, but Israel refused. Yeah, that's where he was hiding out in Israel. And so Israel sent a reply to the Polish Justice Ministry from the Israeli government that said that they would not extradite him because the statute of limitations had expired on war crimes. So you can put, Germans into a pyramid, innocent civilians, you can watch them suffer, you can murder them in mass, and I don't know, I guess statute of limitations can expire. That's all I'm going to say on that, because Israel is, of course, our greatest ally, the most moral everything in the world. Do you know who else agreed with those Czechoslovakian civilians that the things that were done to the Germans were utterly horrific? General George Patton Jr., you're probably familiar with his name because he was a very decorated U.S. general in World War II who led the Third Army, both in France and in Germany. Well, post-war, they appointed him as the military governor in Bavaria, and he led denazification efforts, because that's what we're doing. We're trying to denazify the territory. That's a great effort. But then they say that as he was leading this, he became, quote-unquote, increasingly erratic. PBS states that in April of 1945, he was removed by Eisenhower from his leadership of the Third Army for making inflammatory remarks concerning the denazification policies. What were those policies? He said, quote, "We may have been fighting the wrong enemy all along, but while we're here, we should go after the bastards now, because we're going to have to fight them eventually." He's referring to the Soviets that trained that person that I just showed you, who were utterly sadistic and mass murdering Germans for no reason other than the fact that they were speaking German. They hadn't even voted for Adolf Hitler, had nothing to do with anything, but they had to die.
Candace, you can't honestly believe that these individuals perpetrated these crimes against innocent German civilians for no other reason than because of the fact that they spoke German. The last 2 world wars mean nothing. The extermination attempts mean nothing. Oh no, you're just speaking German, so I'm going to kill you. Candace, there's no excuse for genocide in any capacity. You will never find me making videos like Candace Owens trying to roundabout ways, trying to make it seem like genocidal governments weren't that bad. But we have to acknowledge that the only reason this shit probably happened was because of how insanely malevolent and evil the Nazis were. There is no scenario in which these German civilians should have ever been murdered. It shouldn't have happened. But George S. Patton saying we were fighting the wrong enemy all along is insane, given the fact that the Germans attacked us and the Japanese attacked us. How in the fuck are we fighting the wrong enemy when they literally attacked us? I can see why he probably was removed from his fucking post. You're literally the military governor in a region of the world that this nation attacked us. Their ally attacked us. How in the fuck are we fighting the wrong enemy? And it's funny how Candace Owens says, yeah, they probably were the wrong enemy all along because, look at the Solomon Morel guy. Part of the reason why there was this sentiment of, hey, we should have really fought the Soviets was because the Soviets weren't our friends. The Soviets were only a part of the Allies because Germany betrayed them. It's always funny when I see Russians take so much pride in defeating the Nazis, and we hate the Nazis. You were on their side. You were on their team. It wasn't until they betrayed you that now all of a sudden you hate Nazis, and you're so proud of defeating the Nazis. It was all fun and games before when y'all were buddies. Crushing and annexing Poland and taking the land for yourselves was all cool. It was all... Y'all ever wonder why Eastern European countries despise Russia and fear them? Look at World War II. The Soviets were not innocent and cool and everything. No, they couldn't be trusted because they were a part of the problem in the beginning. And they only ever switched up when they realized they couldn't trust the Germans after being attacked. So it's really funny how she sits there and acts like, oh yeah, we realized the Soviets might have been the bad guys after they, killed, 12 million Germans. No, that's just not, no. No. This entire video is just, I get what Candace is trying to say. She's trying to say maybe Adolf and his homeboys weren't that bad. She might as well just say it anyways,
So yeah, if that's what your concern is, if you're worried about camps, we did that. If you're worried about ethnic cleansing, we did that. Don't even get me started on the camps that we forced our own American citizens into following Pearl Harbor. Yep, that's a thing as well. Of course, you remember that. Japanese, some people weren't even Japanese. They were just Japanese looking. And we went ahead and we put them in camps after Pearl Harbor, and we made them stay there until the end of war. So don't let that be something that you think we're not capable of. But then you move on to the...
Yes, because that's the exact same as what the Germans did. It was wrong. It was evil. But, like, if it were on the same level of what the Germans did, it'd be discussed as much. Like, the reality is we did commit genocide in America. The problem is Candace Owens doesn't want to touch that particular topic. Do you want to talk about how we exterminated the natives to create this country? You don't. Because that would be a white guilt conversation that could... See, the cool thing about this conversation is this is like a Nazi sympathizer video. So she gets to point at like American offenses against Japanese people and say, well, we weren't perfect. The Nazis weren't the only bad guys. Look at what we did. Do you want to talk about some of the things American whites did? Evil things they did. Genocidal acts that could be matched up possibly with the Holocaust. Do you want to? No, you don't, because you know your audience doesn't want to hear that shit. They don't want to hear about what their Anglo-white American ancestors did to create this nation. And I'm one of the people. I have ancestors who fought against Native Americans to create this nation. I'm not ashamed of it. It's history. It is what it is. But it's really funny how the atrocities are carefully picked and carefully decided upon to make these kinds of videos. And it's absolutely ridiculous. Maybe we were fighting the wrong enemy all along. Candace, are you serious right now? I know you're angry at being fired by the Daily Wire. And, you know, to be fair to you, you were harsh on everyone. But the moment you tried to be harsh on Jewish people, you were fired. And harsh is the nice way of putting it, because the reality is you're racist. And you thought you could, you know, direct that same energy toward Jewish folk, and you got fired. I just want to remind you, you're still not white. And the one group of people you will never critique are Anglo-white Americans. And you know you can't do it, because once you do, you're done. You're done. You can direct that same heat toward every group but them. You know that. You're still not free. I saw you made that post on Twitter, finally free. You're not free. You're not free. I can make videos critiquing conservative white America whenever I want to. I've made a litany of videos critiquing black America, street culture, gangster culture, hip hop. I've done it all. I can do whatever the fuck I want to do. I'm free. I'm free. You're not free. Just because you don't work for Jewish people at the Daily Wire anymore does not mean you're all of a sudden free. You and I both know that. You are still in proverbial captivity, because the moment you start critiquing conservative white America, the racism, the misogyny, the sexism, once you start having to talk about those things, you know what time it is. You know you're going to be expelled. You know what time it is. So keep it up.
Of course, that's been embedded into our minds. The Nazis experimented on innocent people. Candace, come on, that's the difference. They experimented on twins. I mean, some of the stories, by the way, sound completely absurd. I'm like, the idea they just like cut a human up and then sewed them back together. Why would you do that? Literally, even if you're the most evil person in the world, that's a tremendous waste of time and supplies. Just slice a person in half and sew them together. That just.
Are you dumb? The Nazis were literally at war, and they committed genocide while fighting a war. That was a waste of supplies. It happens. Incompetence, like, when you're evil, turns out you do things that just are not of your own benefit. It happens all the time. Kind of like Brexit, the stupid shit you supported. Not that Brexit is evil, but the point I'm making is people do stuff against their own interests all the time. Trying to act like who would ever do that? Like, it happens all the time. Why would someone slice someone in half and try to sew them up back together again? That sounds so ridiculous. What the fuck am I? Candace, you too old to be doing this. How old are you? Like 35? Bruh, be for real. Why are you doing this? What happened? Are you that mad at Ben and them? I mean, look, I get it. Like, bro, like, they fired you and shit. That's fucked up. You was a good soldier, bro. You said Ahmaud Arbery was automatically guilty before we even had any evidence, so we know your ass is racist as fuck. You said black Americans were low IQ on Twitter. You worked so hard to show these people what you were about, and they fucking fired you. I'm not gonna lie. I'd be mad too, but what you're doing right now is just disgusting.
Sounds like bizarre propaganda, but let's just go with it. Let's say that that's actually true. Okay, that experimentation is the thing that sets the Nazis apart. Well, why did we bring them all over here thereafter? What was Operation Paperclip? We took all of those top Nazi scientists and we brought them to America. I wonder why we did that.
She thinks she's on to some shit. Yes, governments do underhanded, slimy shit all the time. Yes, we did do that. Does that all of a sudden mean the Allies weren't good all along? Like, what are you trying to say? Like, what are you trying to say? I could point out all kinds of low-down, underhanded shit we did during the Civil War to defeat the Confederacy. Does that mean that the Union was equal to the Confederacy? Huh? People talk about Sherman's March. Oh my God, Sherman's March. Does that all of a sudden make the Union equal to the Confederacy in evil? Because we recruited a bunch of Nazi scientists, which did happen, by the way. Now all of a sudden, we're equal to them. And God forbid anybody ever condemn the Holocaust. Because some people in government did some crazy shit that obviously all of the American people supported and agreed with. And we're happy to see. Like, Candace, what are you doing? Is this really where you want to take, is this like, bro, this is not, like, oh my God.
Maybe for a little more experimentation. Have you heard of Dr. Sidney Gottlieb? Have you ever heard of the CIA? If you think experimentation is unique to the Nazis, you need to wake up. Oh, but Candace, the Nazis murdered people with special needs. You heard of Planned Parenthood? They literally tell you to abort your children if they have special needs. You learn that in the school system. And in terms of experimentation, I invite you again as required readings. This book, Chaos, man. They're talking about this specific operation that took place under the directive of LBJ, who was also a monstrous president that we had. And this operation was called Phoenix. And I'm just going to read you just a couple of sentences.
I wonder if Candace Owens feels like Andrew Johnson was one of the most monstrous presidents we ever had racially. I wonder if she feels that way. I'm genuinely curious, like, if LBJ was one of the most disastrous presidents, monstrous presidents we ever had, and I'm sure she's going to bring up the welfare state. Well, what about the white president who literally went out of his way to sabotage black people? Clearly. Is he one of the worst, or are we just going to hop over him? Conservatives never want to talk about that. Because then they'd be forced to talk about how even when black people were freed from slavery and tried to pull themselves up by their bootstraps, racist white people went out of their way to fuck that up. Now, this is not an anti-white rant I'm about to go on, but my point is, conservatives pick and choose which presidents they're going to demonize for racial shit. Do you want to have a conversation about the president who actually derailed Reconstruction? No, you don't. It's like, none of what you've said changes the fact that the Nazis and the Japanese, which she does not seem to want to do any apologetics for, and we know why, because they're not white, they were uniquely evil at that time. There's no getting around it. What's done is done. Why do you feel the need to, like, what are you trying to say? I'm curious. What are you trying to say? It blows my mind because you're black. And if the people who believe in the type of shit you're propagating win any kind of significant power in this society, you're done. You're done for. I don't know what you think you're going to win if the people who think like you win in this nation. Like, I don't understand. No, the experimentation is not it's not experimentation killing innocent people. It's the level at which they did it. The philosophy of Nazi Germany at that time, coupled with the extensive measures they took to exterminate as many people as possible. The war they started in order to strengthen their empire and probably ethnically cleanse the entire fucking world. Hello? How is this lost on you? You think you can nitpick little events in history to try to make it seem like the Allies and the Nazis are the same? You can't. You can't. That's why you can't bring up any sort of extermination attempts that match the Holocaust. You haven't been able to. That's for a reason that you haven't been able to. What's happening to this woman?
Here. Their attempts were sometimes even more unhinged. In 1968, CIA scientists at the Bien Hoa prison outside Saigon surgically opened the skulls of 3 prisoners, implanted electrodes on their brains, gave them daggers, and left them alone in a room. They wanted to shock the prisoners into killing one another. But when the efforts failed, the prisoners were shot and their bodies were burned. Yeah, it's an operation where we just were mass killing civilians, which we do a lot. But there, of course, if we do it, it's different. It's different because we're not literally Hitler. We drop bombs on entire populations. We firebomb Christians. We drop a nuke on praying Catholics. And if you know about it, you get screamed at by the propagandists in the West. Knowing about it is the crime. The crime is not actually dropping a bomb on praying civilians in Nagasaki. That's not the crime. The crime is not firebombing.
So what do you think should have happened? Do you think we should have sent in 1 million? Like, do you understand how many American troops would have died if we did not bomb Hiroshima and Nagasaki? This is my problem with conservatives. You're fucking retarded. I would never, if I was president and I decided not to use the bombs and instead chose to send in American troops to invade and conquer the mainland of Japan, do you know what would happen to me if the country found out I had 2 super bombs I could have used that would have cost us 0 troops? I'd be killed. The American people would burst into the White House if I was even still in office at that time, or find out wherever I was living and kill me, and rightfully so. Trying to act like the Allies, firebombing Japan, or nuking Japan, or firebombing Dresden, or Germany, or whatever the case might be, trying to act like these acts make us the same as the Nazis is absolutely insane, morally bankrupt, and you are lying. You are lying. You think that if you just say, oh, well, they were praying Christians that were blown up in Nagasaki, that's the problem with y'all. You're fucking weird. Well, Christians died, so that means Hiroshima and Nagasaki was... So if Christians die... So if there's a risk of a Christian dying, any geopolitical move we make is automatically bad. Where do you draw the line? If white people die? So let me guess. White people are gonna die, so we shouldn't have stormed the beaches of Normandy. I'm curious how far this goes. I really am. How far is this racial, religious bias going to go with you? I'm serious. I'm so serious. So because some people were praying during Hiroshima and Nagasaki and they died while praying, the United States is equal to Nazi Germany because someone was praying to Jesus when they got blown up. Okay. I literally, like, people talk about how, you know, Hiroshima and Nagasaki was wrong, and I understand why people feel that way. My issue with Candace Owens in particular saying this is she's a liar. She's purposefully trying to make it seem as though these things are the same. You drop the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, you're the same as the Nazis. No, the fuck we're not. We had choices. The alternative choice was to send in the United States Marine Corps, Army, Navy, in order to defeat the Japanese in their mainland, in their homeland. It would have cost us so many American troops. It would have been a national catastrophe. It would have been a tragedy for us. There's a lot of people alive right now who wouldn't be alive today if we did that. Are you... This is what we're dealing with. This is the new right wing. This is the new right wing. This is conservatives today. This is what we're dealing with. This is what's becoming popular. This is what they're doing. Like, she doesn't even realize what the alternative was for Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Oh, you would have sent in all of those American troops to die fighting against the Japanese? Are we even going to talk about the fact that the Japanese didn't actually surrender until the 2 bombs were dropped? They didn't officially surrender. People always say they were talking about surrender. So? They didn't actually surrender at all. There was no surrender until the 2... Not even after the first one, they didn't surrender. What are we talking about? But that makes us equal to the Nazis? Candace Owens, what happened?
We drop bombs on entire populations. We firebomb Christians. We drop a nuke on praying Catholics. And if you know about it, you get screamed at by the propagandists in the West. Knowing about it is the crime. The crime is not actually dropping a bomb on praying civilians in Nagasaki. That's not the crime. The crime is not firebombing people through Ash Wednesday in Dresden who were civilians, children. No, that's not the crime. The crime is you knowing. It's me knowing. That's the real problem. And I got to stop knowing these things. I got to stop knowing about Pol Pot. I got to stop knowing about the Cambodian genocide and knowing that, of course, there were people that did worse things throughout history. Especially as a Christian, I have got to stop talking about Henry Yagoda. They get real.
You can talk like, bruh, you can know all of these things. It's not against the law to know or talk about these things at all. Like, were there other genocides equal to that of Hitler's? Yes. The reality is, like, someone's gonna get like, out of all the evil dudes, someone's gonna get the bad luck of the draw and be deemed the most evil one. Like, why do you feel the specific need to say Hitler wasn't the most evil? Like, he possibly wasn't. Like, why do you feel the need to try to defend Hitler as much as possible? I don't spend a single pint of energy in my day thinking about, man, why do they pick him though? Why not someone else? Like, that's so unfair to him. Like, it never crosses my mind once. I don't know what's going on with her, but it's sad.
Knowing that, of course, there were people that did worse things throughout history. Especially as a Christian, I have got to stop talking about Henry Yagoda. They get real upset when you talk about the Bolsheviks. Do you want to know why? Because the Bolsheviks were never brought to heel. The Bolsheviks never had to face trials. There were no Nuremberg trials for the Bolsheviks. In fact, many of them came to America, and many of them are in positions of power right now.
Here's my question. If you want to make a competition about who committed more evil acts, you do know white people have committed the most amount of just racially charged genocidal acts in history. The United States is literally a nation founded on ethnic cleansing. Are you going to make a video about how white people are the pinnacle of racial evil? You're not. Why are you engaging in these discussions? Me personally, I don't believe that white people are evil. I don't believe white people are specially evil or uniquely evil. I don't waste my time thinking about these things, generally speaking, at all. Since you want to make this a competition of who was the most evil, who actually did this, are you going to apply that to everything or only what's convenient for you? I'm just curious. And I'm waiting for your video about why the Japanese weren't that bad. I don't know why Candace Owens thinks she's a friend of these people. Candace, you're black. Like, you are black. You are not these people's friend. You never will be. You are a useful tool. If they get their little, perfect racial world, you're not a part of that. A lot of you black conservatives think you're better than other black people. You're not. Most of y'all are politically retarded. Most of you are just dumb. Like, I genuinely, like, most of you black conservatives literally are not political. You're just culture. To call you a culture warrior would be an insult. You are what we would call a pawn. You're not even on the team. You're not even actually a part of the group. You're a piece on their chessboard. Genuinely. The only way Candace Owens can actually comfortably associate with these kinds of people is if she believes she will be accepted. And the only way she can think that is if she thinks she's somehow better than other black people. But having watched that video, it's abundantly clear to me, you're not better than really anyone in the political commentary space, regardless of race. You are one of the least, politically blessed of us. You're blessed with speaking. You're an oratorical master. You're charismatic. You speak with authority. But when it comes to actually understanding politics or the way the world works, you're not capable. You're just not one of those people. You never have been. Just being honest. So, I don't know. She thinks she's superior to other blacks and she's special. Like, no. You're not. You're blessed with an ability to speak, and that's it. That's literally it. You've done nothing to separate yourself even from other people within politics, regardless of race. But let's get to this flat earth shit, because this is just ridiculous.
Guys, imagine being married to me. My poor husband, he rolls over. He's like, "What are you reading?" And I feel like a regular wife says something, I don't know, maybe a love series, Nora Roberts, sweeping her away. Me, on the other hand, he rolled over, he asked me, and I said, "Oh, I'm reading a flat earth theory." And it dawned into an entire conversation. He's like, why are you reading a flat earth theory? And I'm like, because somebody messaged me on Connect about it, and they included some links, and I'm just reading them. I don't know. I'm just an interested person. No matter what, if there's a bunch of people that believe something, I now want to know what it is that they believe. And of course, he pushed me on this, and he was talking about the Earth curvature and science. And I said to him, listen, I'm not a flat earther. I'm not a round earther. Actually, what I am is I am somebody who has left the cult of science. I have left the mega church of science, because what I have now realized is that science, what it is actually, if you think about it, is a pagan faith.
Okay. I'm done. I'm done with this little girl. I'm really done with this little girl. Like, really, for real, bro. You're not a flat earther or a round earther. What the fuck are you? You think the earth is something like you? There's nothing wrong. Like, you come to conclusions on everything the fuck else. Just say you're like, bro, like, just say you're a flat earther. Whatever. Like, it's just we're like, bro, like, we know how you do. Whatever the popular narrative is, you want to be the opposite of that. Talk about some, I'm not a flat earther or a round earther. What the fuck? Bro! Like, and then it's like, bro, your husband is trying to explain the science of the shit to you. You're like, look, I'm not a flat earther or round earther. Shut the fuck up and listen. Listen. Like, do you actually, this is my problem with people like her. All they ever want to do is, I'm just asking questions. Answer them. Answer the questions. Do the research. Learn about these things. It's funny. It's like, have you read any round earth books? Or are you only interested in contrarian narratives drummed up by retards? Sit there talking about some, I've left the cult of science. It's crazy how, like, you're now associating with people who politically go on and on about the white man, all the scientific and civilizational accomplishments of the white man. You do realize those accomplishments are born out of science, right? Sure, a lot of these guys who did it were Christian, but they were engaged in science. They at some point had to put the Bible down mentally and actually do some scientific shit. I'm not a scientist, so I can't get into the actual, classifications and accurate description of whatever they were doing, but I can assure you most of what they were doing, if not 99%, cannot be found in any holy book. To call science a pagan faith is really funny, because it's like, as much anti-Semitism as you've been spewing, Jesus was a Jew, right? All those white boy pictures of Jesus you be seeing, those are not accurate. Most, it's always funny when I see like black people be like, it's a conspiracy, they try to make Jesus white. Every race of people that hear about Jesus paint him in their own image. Asian people have painted him as Asian. Everyone paints him in their own way. I don't think that white people were trying to conspire to whiteify Jesus. Like, you can't expect European painters in the Renaissance to just know what he would have looked like. Of course, they're going to paint him in a way that's familiar to them. But I digress. It's funny how she talks about science as a pagan religion. It's like, ma'am, you worship a Jew. All this, like, Nazi apologia you're doing, and all of this, like, these dog whistles and, running defense for Kanye when you went full on anti-Semitic. It's like, okay, what are you trying to say here? You know what I mean? Like, you're not a member of the cult of science because science is a pagan religion? What do you believe in then? Like, what is civilization to you? Just whiteness and Christianity? Like, is that it? Is that it? That's what civilization is to you? Just whiteness and Christianity. That's it. Like, these are what we're dealing with, people who don't give a fuck about how anything works. Your husband tries to explain how the earth is round, and it doesn't fascinate you at all. All you care about is what is the opposite of what everyone believes. You're not even, like, interested in why the earth is round. Like, like, this is what we're dealing with. We're dealing with people who pride themselves on racial hatred, try to gaslight you when you call it out. We're dealing with people who pride themselves on disliking science, on pushing away obvious facts about the Earth's curvature. You've left the cult of science because science is a pagan faith. If it weren't for science, you would not be you wouldn't be here. You wouldn't be here. Like, you would not, like, you would not be in front of a camera. If it weren't for science, you and I probably would have died from some crazy disease at childbirth or some shit. Like, we probably wouldn't even, like, if it weren't, like, what is happening? Conservatives, What in the William Lane I don't know if he's anti-Science. Like, you know, like, bro, what in the creationist is going on? What is happening? MAGA, this can't be for real. Like, this, like, bruh. Like, but you know what's crazy, though? Is I can't sit here and laugh it off forever. Because y'all are now putting the 10 Commandments in schools. You guys are, you know, you guys are forcing religion all into schools. I can't trust you guys anymore. At first it was funny, but now it's not. Now it's not funny anymore. I'm not a flat earther. I'm not a round earther. I'm someone who is leaving the cult of science. So science is only like science is convenient for you whenever it's convenient. And when it's no longer convenient, it's a cult. It's a religion. What? What the fuck are we? What is happening? I thought Republicans left this shit behind like the late 2000s. Like, I thought this was done. I thought we left behind creationism and all this foolishness. Like, I thought this was done. Are we really coming back to this again, Republicans? Seriously. Are we doing this again? Are we actually doing a rerun of this again? I blame the Daily Wire for this shit. Benjamin and the rest of y'all, this is y'all's fault. I blame y'all. Y'all going to hell for real. This is all y'all. If it weren't for y'all, we wouldn't be dealing with this. And that's just the truth. Like, y'all be the reason why this is happening, bro. Y'all are the reason why this is happening. It's just the facts, bro. Like, Benjamin, what's the last dude? Boring, all of y'all. Clavin, this is all y'all's fault, bro. Real talk. This is all a monster of y'all's own creation. I'm not a flat earther. I'm not a round earther. Lord have mercy. I'm leaving the cult of... I'm someone who has left the cult of science. This is what conservatives are today. They're enemies of equality. They're enemies of empathy. Enemies of science. Enemies of history. They're enemies of anything that does not fit their 100% white Christian, like, utopia society, which Candace Owens, for some reason, thinks she's going to fit into. I don't know how she thinks that. Candace Owens, you're the worst possible person to fit into that. You're a black woman, and yet you're like 100 times more successful than the average white supremacist. Do you think they want to wake up every day and see a black woman who has outcompeted them in life? Why? If they had their ideal society where they've expelled the undesirables, they've expelled black people, they've expelled Hispanics, they've expelled everyone. You think you could just hang around forever being who you are, as successful as you are, as accomplished as you are, and not to mention you've committed the ultimate crime of mixing. So now your inferior blood is now going into their pure gene pool, despite the fact that you're more accomplished than the majority of these ethno-nationalists. Your blood is still perceived as filthy. What are you doing, Candace? Swear to God, what is happening over there? Seriously. Talking about some, you've left the cult of science. Boy, stop. This little girl crazy as hell. Crazy. You've left the cult of science. Like, bro, Ben Shapiro, bro, all of y'all, bro, like Brett Cooper too. Your ass guilty too. You might have just showed up, but I'm blaming you for the fun of it. But I blame all of y'all, bro. Then what we dealing with, bro? Let me know what y'all think in the comment section below, bro. The right wing has gone insane.